Hello everyone. In today's video, we'll be covering how to add measures to both our results containers and our strategy and program containers. Measure objects track the work that we are doing and give insight into population level trends. We utilize two types of measures within our instance. The first are indicator measures. These measures display the indicators you created in your RBA action planning process and say something of central importance about our result statements at the population level. On the other hand, our second category of measures are performance measures. These measures are specific to the work we are doing and will also be outlined in the last phases of your results-based accountability action planning process. Tracked measures should answer one of the following questions about our work. How much are we doing? How well are we doing it? And is anyone better off? Both indicators and performance measures utilize the same process when entering them into Scorecard. So I'll be showing you all an example utilizing a mock performance measure for our food bank strategy today. So very similar to what we did before, we're going to go to our objects. We're going to this time go down to measures instead of containers. And you see that we have three different kinds here. We don't ever utilize variables within our instance, so we're going to stick to indicators and performance measures. For this specific example, we want to go ahead and click performance measure. Now this next page, very similarly to our containers, all of these that are already listed are utilized in other scorecards within our instance. So we don't want to use any of those. And instead, we want to click add new. Now, once we're on this next page, you'll notice that our measures have a little bit more context that you have to go through than our container buckets. So for this example, we are going to use the demo of statewide food banks. Now I'm going to copy and paste that title over in just a moment. Okay, so next thing we want to do is just go down this entire list and make sure that these are all correct. So here we have the type. We know that it's going to be a performance measure. We don't need to change that. We're not going to add any tags for the time being. We want to look at the frequency of this. And for this, we're going to say that we're going to update this on an annual basis. Now, a lot of your performance measures, they might be on a quarterly basis or a semi-annual basis. But for this example, we're just going to stick with annually. Now, the next thing that we have on our list is polarity. So is this basically all this is saying is if the number goes up, is it better? Or if it goes down, is it better? So we want more food banks in South Carolina. So we would say higher is better here. Now the next two boxes, this is basically if you have a percentage or a rate or something else that you want to like explain in another way besides just a whole number. For this example, we're not going to add any decimals because we can't have like a half of a food bank somewhere. We're going to keep that as just 0, and we're not going to add a unit of measure. But if you wanted to add in dollar signs or a percentage or anything along those lines, you can do that there. So that you wanted to add in a dollar sign here just for this example, and you wanted to go before the number, you would just press this box, and you can see right here in this next line, the data format preview. So this is what it's actually going to look like whenever it's added into your scorecard. So we're going to go ahead and take these off for this measure specifically. The next line is your calculation type. Right now, we are not going to worry about the calculation type. This is something that you can utilize if we are going to disaggregate measures or we're going to have disaggregated measures. If we're going to try to aggregate all of our other like child measures into one performance measure where it's calculated over time, they might be useful in those situations. But for this example, we're going to keep that not calculated. And then the rest of this is going to be left blank unless you have a definition in mind down here. So the definition, this is not going to show up on the home page of your scorecard, but this will be available whenever you actually click into this performance measure for more information. So if you want to define your performance measure here or how you calculate it, any of those things, you can do so. I'm just going to put test in here for right now for the sake of our example. Now, once we've went through this whole page, we want to double check this. It's not the end of the world if you mess some of these settings up on this page because you will have the option to change them again even whenever this is published. So let's say that you have this scorecard publicly available. It's out there and people can see it. You can still be changing some of these settings on the back end. If the frequency for your data collection changes or anything along the lines of the granularity as to how many times a year that's going to look at, we're going to need to look at it. So once you press save and exit, it's going to take you to your landing page for your performance measure. So here over on your right side of the screen, we're going to see the story behind the curve, your partners, what works, and the action plan. These are literally just note sections. These will show up on the home page for your scorecard instance. So here's where you would want to put that information that you basically put together during your turn the curve activity. So whenever you started to come up with your performance measures, the story behind the curve that was in that conversation, any partners that'll be involved or be impacting this performance measure, what works, an action plan, all of that information can go in here however you want to do it. So there's not a standardized way that we're asking for to be entered in. This is something where we want to kind of keep the local flavor in here, and you add the context that you want. Now, as I was talking about earlier, we can definitely go back and change any of the information. Let's say that we wanted to change this from performance measure to an indicator. If we had some issues with the formatting properties, you can change it here. With the data properties, you can also change it here. You can add in a data source. And then you also have a history. So let's say that you have updated this several times, or you have a couple different people that are actually responsible for keeping your scorecard up to date. You will be able to see the last person that modified this measure on this last little tab. We're not going to mess with any of that today, but just something good to know as you go through this process. Now, the next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add in some data. In order to do that, we're going to click Data underneath the Edit button here, and it's going to pull up a blank graph. So basically, the way that you could look at this is very similar to an Excel sheet, but you're going to have to populate it yourself. So you have your future button, your prior button here. This is how you're going to actually add in those dates, and it's going to be based off how often you're supposed to collect your data. So we chose annually here. So if I press prior, the first year that's going to come up is our current year. And then after that, it's going to start to count down. Future, same thing, it's going to count up. Now, the thing is that if you want to make this a little bit more specific to a certain time frame, and it's not necessarily inclusive of future time frame or our current time frame, you can cut these off by using the minus button on the future side of things. So if we wanted to only do, let's say 2023 through 2025, we would just take this and press that negative button twice, and now we've got 2025 to 2023 as our range. I'm going to go ahead and add that 1 year back to keep it in line with some of our other performance measures. And the next video that we have in this series is actually add in our values. So you want to add in whatever you have on hand. You might not have all of your performance measure data as soon as you enter in your performance measure to your scorecard, since this might be a new program. This might not be something you've tracked in the past. But let's say for the sake of this example that you have for the last couple of years. So I'm just going to add in some information here. So we might say 5 food banks for 2023, 7 for 2024, 9 for 2025, and 11 for 2026. Now, once we press save, you should see that your graph develops just like that. You can go down here and mess with the slider, and it'll change the number of years that are displayed. But this is the basic graph that you're going to see whenever you go back to your home page on Scorecard. Now, the last thing that we need to do, we've set up our performance measure, all of the contextual information behind the scenes. We've got our graph together. We've got to add it into our scorecard. So the last thing is to go down here to relationships, very similar to how you actually stuck your containers into the scorecard itself. This time, we're going to add our measure into one of the containers. So we're going to click existing container. Here's where you can choose what kind of container you're looking for. In this specific instance, we're looking for strategy, but you don't have to type that in, and I'm going to show you guys why here in just a moment. So our strategy that we are going to try to add this into is going to be implement new food banks in target areas across the state. So let's say food banks across the state. Or actually, let's say food banks across banks in target areas. My apologies. We want to make sure that the wording on this is exactly the same as what we utilize, so it actually pops up, populates. So we'll press search. See that we have our 2 strategies here. This is a duplicate, so I've done this example a couple times before. The first one is the newest one, and in your instance, you'll only have one of these instead of 2, so no worries. We're going to go ahead and press add. So I'm going to put it in both just in case. So now we have it added into those containers. If we go back to our home page, you should now see that you have your performance measure added up underneath your strategy container. And that's going to be exactly the same process if we had an indicator that we wanted to add into our results container. The only thing you need to do to make sure that your graph is set up right is click the little plus button, and you'll see that it's displayed here. Now, the last thing I want to add into this video before we conclude today is the fact that we have our contextual boxes down here. Right now, they are grayed out, but as soon as you start to add in context, regardless if it is a hyperlink, a file, or just some, textual verbiage, you can actually see all of that right below your graph in these situations. So thank you all for your time today. Stay tuned for our next video on disaggregating these measures.